She's trying to disrupt things, guys. She's just trying to disrupt things. Let's continue on over here. Let's continue on.
It was incidents like these that we were told necessitated a letter to the DOJ by the NSBA. Scott Smith was one of the parents the NSBA said should be regarded as a domestic terrorist. And since the arrest, Scott Smith has become this avatar for the left, for all that they think is wrong with these so-called conservative parents, even though they're not all conservative. And they've been speaking up for their kids in school boards across the country. Scott Smith doesn't even consider himself political or particularly conservative, by the way. He's just a dad who considers himself, quote, in his own words, gay and lesbian friendly, yet Scott Smith's life has been turned upside down. And it turns out there's a reason behind his outburst at that Loudon County School Board meeting. His daughter, well, she was raped. She was raped in the bathroom of her high school by a gender-fluid male student who was allowed to use the bathroom, and he was wearing a skirt. Sometimes he wore skirts, sometimes he would wear dresses, according to reports. But the story gets even more complicated than that. So not only was Scott Smith's 9th grade daughter raped in the bathroom, as it turns out, the Loudoun County School Board knew about it, and they tried to cover it up. And the suspect, the rapist, the accused rapist, was quietly transferred to another school and already sexually assaulted someone else in that school. So the timeline here is this video took place 3 weeks after the sexual attack on his daughter, and then October 6th is when the suspect, the accused rapist, sexually assaulted another girl at the new school to which they were transferred. But rather than actually prosecute the rapist, the school boards, they all went after Scott Smith in order to suppress the story. The reason that he was escorted out, that was, by the way, that school board meeting was the vote on the trans bathroom issue, whether they were going to pass it or not, which they did. And Scott Smith showed up to give account of what his daughter had endured, and he was barred from speaking. So as it turns out, the Loudoun County School Board, they're very left-wing, and they wanted to pass that very, very controversial policy. They didn't want Scott Smith's daughter and her crime, the crime against her, to get into the way. And they so badly didn't want it to get out. They actually lied. They lied to the public and they lied to parents when this whole issue came up in discussion, that they had no knowledge of any incident. They actually said this in this June 22nd school board meeting in which Scott Smith was arrested, the superintendent, Scott Ziegler, said, quote, "To my knowledge, we don't have any record of assaults occurring in our restrooms," end quote. Now think about this. So after the rape of his daughter, Scott Smith and his wife, they show up to the June 22nd Loudoun County School Board meeting to speak out against the proposed transgender bathroom policy. Imagine being this dad and hearing that the superintendent of your school board in public flat out denied any knowledge of your daughter's rape in order to help pass a transgender bathroom policy that enabled it in the first place. But there is so much more. So right before Scott Smith was wrestled to the ground, another community member who allegedly was part of a group of left-wing parents who support the school board and have threatened parents who criticize the school board, looked Scott in the eyes and told him that his daughter wasn't raped and said, quote, "That's not what happened." Now, as Daily Wire and Luke Rosiak notes, Smith tried to contain himself as activists. They taunted him. And they were prioritizing their lived experience and believe women and all that stuff, but they ignored his daughter. So again, imagine you're that dad. Your daughter was raped by a gender-fluid male who sometimes wears a skirt, sometimes doesn't, and who is able to go to the girls' restrooms, their private space. And the school board denied any knowledge of the incident. Then a member of your community walks over and says, without hearing your story, that they don't believe you because believe all women, that's situational. And now this neighbor was apparently a friend of Scott's wife, and her name is Jessica Schmorn. And she supports the progressive policies of the school board, like the bathroom policy that enabled the rape of the daughter. Now, Jessica Schmorn, in fact, she was also a part of what is called an anti-racist parents Facebook group, which is a bunch of losers that don't have jobs, and they decide to go and dox and bully and intimidate and try to harass parents who are speaking out and criticizing some of the curricula and policies that the school board's passing. They're horrible people. The subpoenaed Facebook records, they show that Jessica Schmorn, she was actually encouraging the Facebook group to dox parents like Scott Smith who opposed critical race theory. Guess who else was part of that group? A leftist Loudoun County School Board member named Beth Bartz, who also solicited the group to call out and harass parents by name. And it gets crazier. So the top prosecutor in Loudoun County is Commonwealth prosecutor named Buddha Biraji. And she's a radical progressive. She has close ties to the Loudoun County School Board, and she was elected by a 1% margin after George Soros paid nearly $1 million to support her bid. Guess who showed up personally in court to prosecute Scott Smith's misdemeanor disorderly conduct charge? The Soros-backed prosecutor, who won by barely 1%. Now, according to Daily Wire and Luke Rosiak, who broke the story, Elizabeth Lancaster, Scott Smith's attorney, could not believe that Beholden would actually seek jail time for Scott Smith for a misdemeanor. Lancaster said she was sure that the charges would be dropped, and instead, that Soros-funded attorney and the top law enforcement officer in a county of 400,000 residents showed up to personally try the case, and that pretty much never happens. Lancaster explained in court that her client was angry, understandably so, after his daughter was sexually assaulted in a bathroom by a person identifying as gender fluid, and then, of course, the school just transferred that person to another school to hide it, and reminded her that prosecutors that had substantiated the assault and chosen to bring charges. But Beholden sought jail time against Scott Smith anyways, and Scott Smith's attorney said, quote, "It's incredibly unusual for a disorderly conduct case to even go forward. And the idea that they would actually seek jail time, I guess in my 15 years, the number of times that I've seen that happen would be zero. To keep Scott Smith silent and his story far away from the school board meetings where it might come out and change the narrative." The Loudon County School Board also issued a no trespassing order against Smith, and they actually issued that before this meeting even happened, which is why he was taken into custody. And that's why they didn't want Scott Smith there. So this is some of the video of Smith's arrest. Notice his wife screaming out what happened to their daughter in the video on June 22nd. Watch. So in a nutshell, you had two girls allegedly sexually assaulted in two different schools 4 months apart by the same person. And yet the only person convicted of a crime is the victim's father because he refuses to be quiet for the school board. This is evil. Scott Smith had this to say, quote, "It's been so hard to keep my mouth shut and to wait this out. It has been the most powerless thing I've ever been through. I don't care if he's homosexual, heterosexual, bisexual, transsexual. He's a sexual predator," end quote. That's exactly right. These school boards do not care about the safety of your children. Maybe a couple of the members do, but by and large, I think that they're showcasing, especially when you look at the statement by the National School Board Association, they're showcasing that they prioritize political agenda and fealty to the man in the White House than your female minor children particularly. Stuff like this is why America's falling apart. The left is filled with rage and hate and political agendas, and they don't care how many young women they have to sacrifice at the altar of progressive males' desires. So much so that they won't even protect a 9th grade girl who was raped. And they protect her sex offender and advance a transgender bathroom policy because here's the thing, if a man decides he wants to identify a woman and use the women's restroom because he feels uncomfortable, that's accommodated. But if a woman feels uncomfortable because a man is using her restroom, regardless of how he identifies, she's told to sit down and shut up, and she's sexually slurred as a TERF. And her comfort is ignored because she's definitely not going to be accommodated. It's the erasure of women. This is what we were talking about when we talk about the protections of women being completely obliterated. This. No, you have people who would rather destroy the life of a child and an innocent father. And yet, parents like Scott Smith and you, if you speak up for your kids, you're apparently called domestic terrorists. Antifa's not, but you are. It's according to the National School Board Association and Merrick Garland's DOJ. You know who the real domestic terrorists are? Loudoun County School Board. The Loudoun County School Board are domestic terrorists. They won't stand up for a female student who was raped by a policy they supported. They're the domestic terrorists. And if Merrick Garland is sending the FBI anywhere, maybe it should be to Loudon County, so we can better understand how a school board, how a superintendent, and how a Loudoun County Commonwealth prosecutor could all seemingly conspire to destroy a family so far they've been able to get away with it. This 9th grade girl was assaulted in one of the most vulnerable periods of her life. Can you imagine being a freshman high school girl and the entire nation knows you were raped in the bathroom and they called your dad a domestic terrorist, and all of the adults in the government system that you were told would protect you refused? And then, in fact, they worked to cover up what was done to you. And then when your dad tries to protect you, the progressive leadership and the bullies that are the adults in Loudon County, they decide to attack him and your family. Is this the progress that progressives stand for? because it's evil. This can't continue. I'm going to tell you what, someday some school board is going to try to detain the wrong dad for speaking up for his kid. Parents, this is torches and pitchforks time. People have every right to be livid over this. What happened to Me Too? What happened to Believe All Women? What happened to women you're safe in your bathrooms? The left and this administration, they're backing everyday people into a corner. And you got to have justice. And you can't promote one group over another in front of the law. That's unconstitutional. If you think that, I don't know what people think they're going to get out of this. You got to have justice, or else I fear disorderly conduct at a school board meeting won't be